Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Silver Salvage podcast. Today, I would meet Adriane Wilson. Adriane was a collegiate athlete just on the verge of making the Olympic team when she found out she had cancer. She still rebounded back from that, became a competitive athlete, actually competes now in the Highland Games, but more importantly, pivoted to coach our wounded veterans through the Invictus teams and the Warrior Games. This was a fascinating interview. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. With no further ado, let's get into the episode. Well, Adriane, it's so nice to finally meet you in person.
Nice to meet you too.
I'll be honest, since your name was forwarded to me, I've got all into the Highland Games and I've been kind of researching the living shit out of it.
It is so fun.
The Invictus stuff, turns out right before this podcast, I was messaging with one of my colleagues who happens to work at Fort Belvoir, and he's a former 18 Delta. And as soon as I said, listen, I'm having a podcast with this lady who's a coach for the U.S. Army Paralympics. He goes, Invictus! And I'm like, yes, that's the one.
Yeah.
So awesome. So thanks for coming, first of all.
Who's your friend? Do I know your friend? It's probably Slim, but.
I don't know. His name is Mark Diaz.
Okay. Maybe I ran into him. That's funny fun.
Maybe.
I was out of Belfort twice. Right before we went to the Netherlands. So we went to The Hague 2 years ago, and then Dusseldorf last year. So we did our team camps at Belvoir. So that was pretty funny. There's a chance I ran into him.
Yeah, there is a chance. I'll certainly make an introduction if you didn't, because he's a cool guy. I always make fun of him. I love the guy to death, but he can tell stories. And he'll be one of those guests that you invite over for dinner. And I hope he's listening to this podcast. He'll be one of those guests you invite over for dinner, and he'll start telling stories. And it's like 2 a.m. And you're like, you want to go to sleep, but you don't want to kick him out because the stories are so good.
Those are great.
Awesome. So let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
Tell our audience who you are, where you're from, what you do a little bit.
Well, my name is Adriane Wilson. I'm originally from Ohio. I did track and field growing up, and that's where I actually found my love for competing at a higher level. I always did sports growing up, so softball, golf, that sort of stuff. We had a boat, so we did water sports.
Did you say golf as a sport?
Yes. I golfed on Monday.
I'm teasing.
Oh, it was a scramble. It was a charity event. So
all right, fair enough. I always say that a golf course is from in my case just a waste of a perfectly good shooting range.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, that's fine.
Just teasing. Carry on. Sorry, I'll interrupt the interview. I hope you're okay with
that. So I've always been involved in sports. My parents were very active as well. I just kind of did with my sister. I have an older sister, and she kind of got into track and field in 7th grade. I followed suit. So I got into throwing in 7th grade because I was terrible at basketball. And I fell in love with it. It was a lot of fun. It actually turned out to be pretty good at it as a young age. And so, and I ended up going to Ashland University in Ohio. It's a small Division II school in Ohio for track and field. I studied PE and health, so I actually got a teaching degree. But my major degree was in track and field and throwing. So our head coach at the time was Bill Gallagher, and I just love that man to death because he just put so much of his heart and soul into that program. And I know I wouldn't be where I am without him today. But also was my head coach, my throwing coach was Jed Logan. And every time I say Jed Logan, it just makes my heart super full. He was a 4-time Olympian in the hammer throw and probably the most incredible human on the planet. So super inspiring.
A good coach would leave such an impression on you, right? Because I can pinpoint the people that influenced my life, and they weren't. Love my parents. I think they did a phenomenal job with what they had, and some of my teachers, but really the coaches outside of those systems that made the biggest influences.
Yeah.
Right?
But the time that they both invested in me as an athlete, sir.
Yeah, I'm sure. No, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you short. My question was, throwing is not the typical sport that typically you hear people gravitate towards, men or women for that matter, right? You hear about track and field, like, okay, so you ran 100, 400, maybe the long jump or the high jump. You don't think about throwing. necessarily as the extension of it. So how did you get into that? Like,
Well, I found out during basketball that I was not very good at shooting a basket, but I also had the asthma, the sports-induced asthma. So I just wasn't confident in the running portion. And probably it was just me not having enough conditioning. But I got into the throwing because my sister did it. And it was less running than being on the track. So that's actually how I found out about throwing.
But you're throwing a lot heavier stuff, though.
Yes. Yep.
What's the weight of the shot put and the hammers?
In high school, at the high school level, the girls throw a 4-kilo shot put, which is actually the same all the way through high school, college, and professional level. But for boys in high school, they throw a 12-pound, and then into college and professional, it's 16 pounds. So in high school, I threw 42 feet 10 inches in the shot, or no, 40. Sorry, it was 41.11. It was fine.
That's a pretty long distance for something that's, you said 4 kilos, so about 8.5 pounds.
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, 8.8.
So
but to put in perspective, I threw 40 feet-ish in high school, and then I became the 13th American woman to throw over 60 feet with the same shot put as soon as I figured out how to train properly. And I had the right coach.
That's awesome. Cool. So what did you do after college?
After college, I actually decided I wanted to be a professional athlete. And I took the tough route of, being a professional athlete's not glamorous at all. I had to hold on like 3 jobs. I trained when I could. I not making a lot of money, eating whatever I could. I mean, fortunately for us, after college, again, Coach Gallagher, our head coach, he had managed to convince the university to start a track club at the university. So we had, when I graduated, it was leading into the 2004 Olympic trials and the games in Athens. And we had about 4 or 5 athletes that were training with us for that purpose. He's like, you know what, this university can support you guys, and we can bring some great positive, press to the university. Let's start a track club. And they helped us out with, food on campus. We got housing. I think they had houses that they bought around campus that they were going to eventually tear down for, rebuilding. So we had a house on campus, and we also had health insurance, which I'm going to allude to a very big part of my life, was really super necessary for me. Because once you get out of school, you lose that support of the college atmosphere, of the college system. So Coach Gallagher, he was always just so bright and always thinking ahead. He's like, we need to take care of these athletes because this is a pivotal part of their training to make the Olympic team. The Olympics is the hardest team to make. Team USA, really difficult to make. Right. So with that support, we had 2 of our athletes qualify in the hammer throw, a female athlete, Jackie Jessling, and then A.G. Kruger. So we had 2 athletes make the team for the Olympics that year. And this is a small little farming community, Ohio, but it was the right atmosphere, the right training group, the right coaches, the right support from the school. So I think it was just, lightning the bottle. It just, you don't catch that everywhere. It was a really special time.
Yeah, that's very cool. So that is certainly not the typical run. So I know you and I corresponded for a little bit before this, and you were trying out for the Olympics and you weren't able to make it. So you mind sharing a little bit?
Well, yeah, that's where the health insurance comes to play. So during the fall conditioning of 2003, I'm 23 at the time. I was in the last stage of my degree. I just had to do my student teaching and I was going to graduate. So I timed it up just right to have just student teaching in the fall so that I could focus on just competing in springtime when it's time to, really compete for the games, to make the team. And I was having just a rough time with the fall conditioning. The sports-induced asthma started jumping in again, and I was feeling just really weak and just really rough. And I thought it was just, it's fall time, maybe it's some allergies, or, I'm kind of pushing myself being away at school all day long and coaching and teaching. Maybe I'm just kind of run down. So at one point, I woke up in the middle of the night with just a ton of pressure on my chest. And, I thought it was, again, something asthma related or something. And so I ended up going to the local hospital, and then they just gave me a breathing treatment, sent me home. But then I'm like, this isn't right. So let's use this health insurance and go get checked out. And they suggested I get like, a chest x-ray. So they did that. And like, well, maybe you should get like a CAT scan. And I'm like, oh, okay, if that's what you think. And voila, this health insurance helped me out. I did the chest x-ray, like it was on, or sorry, the CAT scan on a Saturday because I was still doing student teaching during the day. They're like, okay, well, we'll send you results. You can check in on Monday with the results. And I could kind of tell that the cat has a toy. I'm not sure if you can hear that. Sorry.
It's fine.
I'm
used to it. Usually I have two rambunctious dogs running around or a 2.5-year-old baby, which is just as noisy as a cat. It's all good.
Well, she normally is just sitting, but I'm going to steal this for a second. Sorry.
It's all good. Doesn't matter to me. Keeps it authentic.
I got it.
I'm going to stop pulling at you in a second.
So I ended up, when I had the scan, you could tell that the tech, she wasn't allowed, she's not a radiologist, so she couldn't read it for me. How'd you find that one? How do you have so many toys, Kat? Oh my goodness. But you could tell that there was something not right. So fast forward, I had to teach all day Monday. And then so after student teaching, I went to the student health center to see if I got my results from the school nurse lady. And she's like, yeah, you got some results. I think you need to go somewhere. I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, well, you need like you need to see a thoracic surgeon. You have a mass covering 2/3 of your chest, which is putting a lot of pressure on your heart and your lungs, which is probably why you're experiencing so much discomfort while you're breathing. I'm going to steal this one too. This is an important part of that, honey bun. All right, 2 toys down. I got them. Okay, she's done.
What's the cat's name?
Honey bun.
Between the golf and the honey bun, I'm losing a little bit of respect.
But I'm still kind of a badass, so just that's a secret. This is my So I'm talking to this poor nurse, and she just does not know to tell me that I'm in for a ride right now. And so I get hooked up with a thoracic surgeon back in my hometown because small town Ashland doesn't have anything like that. So I get set up to go see a thoracic surgeon the next day. I do student teaching. I drive the 100 miles back home, and this thoracic surgeon, actually his name was Dr. Coach. It was really kind of cool. But he's going over everything and just looking at your chest X-rays and CAT scan. So we're probably going to have to go in and do a biopsy, but I'm 99% sure it's Hodgkin's lymphoma. We'll get you started with some chemo, and one thing after another. I'm just like. Just blown away. Like I'm not processing at all that this is cancer. I'm 23. I'm in the best shape of my life. I was ranked 3rd in the United States for the shot put. I'm supposed to be on the Olympic team. This is my plan. I have a plan. I've been training, and nope. Everything came to a halt. So I ended up doing all the tests, and sure enough, it's Hodgkin's lymphoma. I get set up with an oncologist and an incredible oncology team. Back in my hometown, and went through 6 months of chemo. I commuted back and forth from my hometown to Ashland so I could still kind of train. And, the training, I loosely say training because most of the time I felt pretty shitty. But I needed to be in my atmosphere. I needed to be with my team and my people I trained with, my training partners. And they lifted me up every single time I was there, even though I looked terrible. I was losing my hair. Squatting 95 pounds was almost impossible. It just was, I was wrecked. But I didn't care because I still wanted to train and I still wanted to do the best I could for that time period because the trials was it. That's what I've been training so hard for. So that was September. I ended my last chemo was March 8th of 2004. And so I had about 3 months or so to be, not on chemo and still train for the Olympic trials. Which were in Sacramento that year. Now, fast forward, I do a couple meets. I'm actually not terribly far behind. I mean, of course, I'm a little far behind. To the international standard, I was, still I had the meter to go. But I was pretty happy with how I was coming back from chemo and having the cancer. I ended up competing in Sacramento, and I got 5th place. That was my best finish at the U.S. Olympic trials, and that was 3 or 4 months after chemo. So that's my superhero time right there.
Oh yeah, that's freaking amazing. And
yeah, I was just thrilled to be there. But looking back now, I was in such tunnel vision throughout that whole period that I didn't really think that I was that seriously sick when I really was. I was had I not taken care of myself, had I not had the right chemo treatment, or just that I didn't know that I was sick, who knows what could have happened. So was it unfortunate? Yeah, but I made it work.
I would say so I can relate to some of that. I did not have the cancer, but I was actually in a fight in California, in a semi-pro fight, and my left arm just drops numb. And turns out I had a tumor in my spinal cord. It was benign, but all of a sudden I started losing all this weight. I'm losing control of my arms. So surgery, take it out. And what you said about the support of the team, I remember it was at Johns Hopkins. Surgery was on a Monday, and the doctor said, well, you got to be here for 2 weeks and then go to rehab for 4 more weeks. Like, what do I need to get out of here? Because I need to get back to my tribe. And he's like, well, you got to walk around the floor one time and be able to walk up and down a flight of stairs. I have no feelings in my legs. So this day, my proprioception is off. And I was able to do that by Friday. Saturday, I was in the gym, walking at 0.5 miles per hour with a cane. But nonetheless, I was with my tribe, and it's such a huge psychological difference. So
For sure.
I can't relate to anything that you've done, but I can relate to some of the emotional baggage that comes with it. So it's amazing. So 5th after 3 months after chemo, and then you celebrated recently with your mom going on a cruise.
I did, yes.
Yep.
I missed the team in Athens in 2004, and I've always wanted to go to Greece. And so this year, my mom treated me. Love you, Mom. We did a Mediterranean cruise that started out in Italy, and we visited Santorini, Mykonos, and then Athens. And so we got to go to Athens and spend the day there, and checked out some of the ancient ruins. And it was such a fun feeling of just awe, for sure, because I am such a nerd for like all the ancient ruins and just how incredibly old these structures are, and how well preserved they are, how well made they were. It's just, this was built in 480 BC. This structure was built here, and then 1,000 years later, they built the cathedral on top. Just like we don't have anything in the States that's nearly as old as that, and it just was just fascinating. But we also were able to visit one of the venues that hosted a couple of the events at the 2004 Games, and it was kind of bittersweet. My mom was a little bit more emotional than I was, because I've kind of I've worked through that, that disappointment. And, I'm still at the thought that, everything happens for a reason. Was I disappointed I didn't make the team? Yeah. Am I happy I'm still here? For sure. And, the memories and the bonds that I made with my teammates, my training partners, and, the track and field community was pretty incredible in the support, because this was way before, the Facebook and Instagram, where it was easy to connect with people. I found a box just recently, because I was going through some stuff, of just some really nice cards and letters people sent me that, I may have never even met, or just they knew me through track and field, that just the encouragement. And that was just, it was so nice to have that support of just strangers and people maybe you've only heard of. And but the visit up in Athens was pretty surreal, and I felt really good about the day, and I got myself a little challenge coin from the venue, and I have it up on my challenge coin board. And yeah, it was a great tribute to 20 years of being now cancer free. And I'm just so grateful for all the experience I've had since then. And that's where I'm at right now.
Oh, that's the only way to look at it, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So we didn't make the Olympics, unfortunately, but you rebounded and took a slightly different route. So tell us a little bit about what you do now, or what you've done since.
Well, I continued training for a couple more years. I competed the 2008, 2012 trials and did pretty well. I made it to finals, but I really think that unfortunately 2003, 2004 was probably my best chance. But learning through all that, I managed to have some amazing coaches. Well, first was Coach Logan, but then also I moved out to Arizona to train there full time. I worked with Charles Poliquin exclusively for my training, and then also with John Medina, who was also a 3-time Olympian, silver medalist shot putter, an all around really cool guy. And then also his dad is Bill Godina. So I actually worked with Bill, the Colonel, for many years, and he's still just someone I call all the time. He's a very special person in life. But yeah,
And
so
I'm sorry, I will say to anybody that comes from the fitness world, right? So I grew up in the fitness world. I was a personal trainer for a while. My undergrad is in kinesiology, right? So was in that world for a while. And Charles Poliquin is a big name in the industry. For people that are not familiar, right? It's not just John Smith. It's a big name. So training with people like that's certainly pretty impressive. And I'm sure great experience.
Actually, my college coach, Chud Logan, he was one of Charles' athletes when he was younger, and had Charles on speed dial. So he's like, Charles, I have someone for you. I need some help. Right when I was diagnosed, and Charles said, just bring her out to the center. So Judd and I went to Tempe a couple times, and Charles just looked at me. He's like, okay, we're going to do this, and he set me up with training programs. A full line of like some of the supplements and stuff, as far as your ashwagandha, your sequoia giganta. Like I had this box of supplements. I didn't know what they were. A lot of Chinese medicine. And I remember bringing it back to my oncologist, and he's like, really, Adriane? I'm like, do you mind? He's like, are you still taking chemo? I said, yeah. He's like, okay. You had Western medicine, Eastern medicine kind of battle it. But, Charles has helped me out in so many different ways, to battle the nausea and be able to preserve whatever muscle I still had when I was basically poisoning my body for 6 months. But he is kind of portrayed as a kind of a hard ass and just like really tough. But he was a very, very soft hearted man. He was very sweet to me, and I'm very, very grateful for that experience. I wish I was paying attention a lot more than I did, because I was just being the athlete. I just did what I was told. And looking back now, I'm like, man, I wish I would have asked him so many more questions, because unfortunately we lost him a couple of years ago, and it was very, very sad, but I have a lot of great memories of him just treating me like I was his daughter. He was really, really kind to me.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So you got at some point into the Highland Games.
Oh yeah.
I was actually, just so you know, I was about to wear my kilt for this.
I have many kilts. I love the kilts.
I only have one. my wife is part Irish, part Scottish. The Campbell clan, and
that's actually what Judd's clan was. So that's a good clan.
Yeah, so I have the Campbell clan kilt. I asked for permission, so I think I'm the only Jew that's allowed to wear it.
You're totally allowed. We encourage anybody to, you can pick your own tartan. It doesn't matter.
There you go.
You'd be surprised how many people can actually find some heritage that they're linked, somehow. So it's actually pretty fun.
I'll figure it out. I probably have a castle somewhere. I don't know. So you're right. I transitioned from the shot put when I was still doing okay, but I wasn't really battling it out with the elite gals like I should have. So a friend of mine, Bert Soren, said, Adriane, you'd be really good in the Highland Games. And Bert was a pro at the time, and this is when I was still living in Arizona. And I sought out, John Godina had an athlete that he was training that was in the Highland Games that was local. And I got with their local group and learned some of the events. Loved it. It was so much fun. So I went from throwing just this one little shot put to now there's 9 different events in the Scottish Highland Games. You throw stones, you throw weights for distance that kind of looks like a discus. You do a Scottish hammer toss where you wind it around your head and release it, but your feet stay stationary. A lot of people are familiar with the caber toss. That's the big telephone pole, the tree. Yep. It's usually a tree that we pick up and we try to flip it for accuracy. And then we also have the weight over bar. Is it for accuracy? Because I thought it's for distance.
The caber is for accuracy. So there's a judge that's standing behind you, and then sometimes there's a judge on the side. So you're going to be carrying this caber vertically. So you create a little basket in your hands. So if you intertwine your fingertips, and it's resting on your shoulder, and it's going vertically up into the sky, basically, you're going to run with it, and you try to flip it. For the men, sometimes the pro guys, I mean, it's over 100, 120 pounds. I mean, it can be pretty hefty. But it's the length that kills you. So if it's like 17 or 18 feet long, you have to time it upright to pull early enough to flip it end over end. Because you want to flip it end over end, and you want it to land perfectly in front of you like you're looking on a face of a clock. If it lands at 12 o'clock where your feet are standing, you get a perfect toss. If you go off a little bit to the side, like maybe it looks like 10 o'clock, that's not as good as a 12, but it's still a turn. But if you pull and it kind of goes up and then it comes back towards you, then that's what the side judge does. They take a look at the degree. They might say, well, that only went about 45 degrees up, and that would be your score. So always want to turn it. That's best. But yeah, that's one event that I kind of figured out early. And it's the strangest thing because you kind of have to have a caber to be good at it, to practice it. And not a lot of people have big trees in their backyard they can just flip anytime.
I was about to say, it's probably has to be limited training spaces for that.
Yeah. So I'm fortunate. I have a little field that I have the standards that go up and down, so I can measure my height events for weight over bar, and for the other one's called a sheaf toss. It's a burlap sack. For men, it's either 16 or 20 pounds, and for women, we use 10 or 12 pound bag that we put a pitchfork in it, and we flip the bag off the pitchfork to throw it for height over a bar.
Oh wow.
This is what we do for fun.
So we teach a class at our school. It's called Havoc. It's a tactical fitness class, right? And I know we're going to get into the tactical side in a second, and you work with military, but people come with kits on, rifles, pistol, and think of it as CrossFit. And I don't want to get into the whole conversation about CrossFit because I'm personally not a huge fan, but that's a whole separate story. But CrossFit with the tactical element, like there's targets, they have laser markers, so they have to do, let's say, a clean and then get on target. But I'm getting ideas for, okay, next class, I'm going to have some burlap bags with some weight in it and a pitchfork. So they're going to do that. So if
it
you
is a weapon. Watch out for that pitchfork.
What was that? Yeah, seriously, right? It's a weapon on its own accord. I love it.
Sure.
So, so I love watching the Highland Games where I can catch it on TV. It's not probably the most popular sport, so it doesn't show up very often.
Fringe sport.
But when you catch it, it's so entertaining and so captivating. Like you can't look away, right? It's pretty awesome.
And you'd be surprised. There are probably Highland Games all across the United States every single weekend of the summertime. So I can find a game in every month of the year if I wanted to. Summertime is definitely the busy time. That's when you'll find them at festivals, either like an actual Scottish festival or an Irish festival. You might find them at Renaissance fairs. But I mean, if you start actually looking for them, you'll find some that are near you. And it's a ton of fun because it's all day long of the athletic portion. But then you also might have, sheepdog demonstrations, or, I mean, they always have music and dancing. And sometimes there's whiskey tasting, and you can find out more about your genealogy and the actual history of everything, which is kind of neat to find out. But they're a ton of fun. And I've traveled, I've competed in Iceland and Scotland and Germany and all of the United States, Canada, Alaska, it's been all over. So it's pretty cool.
So how are you ranked in there? How are you doing in the Highland Games?
Right now I'm probably top 5 or 6 in the elite women, and top 1 or 3 of the masters women. So I'm hanging. That's right awesome. Now. This is my 16th year, I think, competing.
Yeah, I'm sure being starting in track and field in 7th grade, you didn't think one day you'll be tossing. Very cool. So let's do a little segue if you don't mind, and I want to dig a little bit into your work with the Paralympics and Team Invictus and that sort of stuff, because so just a little bit of background, being obviously from Israel and serving the military there, Israel has a high percentage, unfortunately, of wounded veterans. And the Paralympics in Israel, for people that are not aware, it's pretty big around the world in general, but certainly in Israel, because we have such a high percentage, and they typically do pretty good at Olympics. Actually, we get a lot more medals in that than we do in the regular Olympics for that reason. So that program is pretty well developed in Israel. So I'm curious about, first of all, you got into it and what kind of work you do as a coach with these athletes. So just would love to hear about that a little bit.
Well, actually, my first experience with adapted sport, a friend of mine named Luke McKay, who was a collegiate hammer thrower, and also he was also an adapted sport coach as well, said, Adrian, would you ever be interested in coaching the Warrior Games? And I'm like, I don't know what that is. He's like, well, it's adapted sport for our military. It's throwing, it's all the events. So there's shooting, there's archery, there's wheelchair basketball, wheelchair rugby, all sorts of adapted sport, and swimming, that sort of thing. I said, well, yeah, but I don't really know much about it. He's like, you'll figure it out. So he actually got my name thrown out there, and I was picked up in 2016 to coach Team Army at the Warrior Games at West Point, and it was just an incredible experience. So I've had a lot of experience, coaching university, private coaching, high school level for track and field, and I thought, well, this is pretty similar, I guess, and it is. However, I never worked with someone with a prosthetic, or someone is throwing out of a throwing chair, because those are two modifications you can make when you're have any type of disability. As a thrower, there's something called a throwing frame, that if you do have some type of lower body impairment, or maybe it's a back issue, something that you're not able to stand and throw under control, you'll be strapped to this really sturdy chair that's kind of ratchets down to the ground, so it's not going anywhere either. And so you're basically throwing from a chair. It's very, very stable because you're going to be Velcroed, strapped in, and so you're not going to move. But I had no idea this existed. And fortunately for me, Brad Fitchthorn, he was the head field coach at the time, and he just showed me the ropes. He's like, all right, Adrian, this is the rules. This is how to do it. Let's make sure you strap them in this way, and they can't lift their butt, that sort of thing. So he was really super helpful, and just trial by fire. Like, we got to get this done. And with the military, you gotta do things pretty quickly and efficiently. So I picked things up pretty quickly, and I had just an amazing time, working with the athletes, listening to their stories, if they wanted to talk about their injury and how they've overcome, and just how adapted sport just opened up their eyes, that even though they're missing a limb, or that they have, a terrible TBI or something, either combat related, or some of the athletes, it's injured, ill, or wounded. So some of them were going through chemo because they had breast cancer, or that's something, they had something going on that they could not be in their active duty status at that time. And so adapted sport like Warrior Games, it's provided through the SRUs, or soldier recovery units, or whatever their warrior care units are for their service. And the stories they shared, as far as like, yeah, I wanted to die because I was no longer the soldier I used to be. That was my life, that was my job. And so now they are successful in a sport that they never knew they could play. That throwing a little shot put from a chair all of a sudden is life. Like, this is so much fun. This is something I never knew I could do. And I love it because I love throwing. It's been my passion for so long, and to share that, and to see someone else make that connection on that one throw where it just hits, and like, I know what that feels like. I feel like my body is working for me again instead of against me. And it's such an incredible feeling to see someone enjoy what they're doing and being physical again.
It's a different level of heart, I always say. Like,
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to work with a few, and just the level of purpose and
Mhm.
the joy, it's so different than working with professional and semi-professional athletes. I mean, I think it's a different level of commitment, in a sense. They're doing it for the right reasons, in my mind. That's awesome. So can you share one story, like one that really touched you in a sense?
Oh, Beth King. I'm just going to yell at her because I love her. She is fantastic. Beth was, I'm going to say this wrong. I think she was she was a hooker on a helicopter. So,
Every
but,
helicopter needs one.
hello, Beth, love you. But she, her helicopter was hit with IED, and she was knocked out, and she had to like dangle from a safety rig, and so she was jostled around quite a bit. So severe TBI just from the explosion. And she was pretty jacked up with her back, and she had, some undiagnosed concussions, that sort of thing. She went to med for a little while, and then they sent her back out. And she's just very headstrong and loves being a soldier. So she went back to work and continued to do her job. And then she, but ended up having some other serious injuries that kind of came from that explosion, from that accident. And when she was finally released, her condition kind of deteriorated, and she was starting to have a lot of neuropathy with her feet and having difficulties walking. And the VA was doing everything they could to help her medically, and she got into adaptive sport. She got into cycling. Cycling was the first thing she could do, because she did what's called the recumbent bike, where she's kind of sitting in like a and I would say like a sled type thing where her legs are extended, but she's only using her hands as a hand cycle. Oh, sorry, she was using hand cycle first. And she's also done recumbent as well. So hand cycle and recumbent, so all different ways of actually riding a bike. Her competitive bike was the recumbent bike. And so she got into that, and she found out she was a really good racer. All of a sudden, she had a purpose again. She was turbo. Everybody thought she was just so fast, and she was so competitive. She got into the Warrior Games and succeeded so well. I remember we were at a training camp before the actual Warrior Games. I said, "Hey, Beth, ever thought about throwing before?" She's like, "No, coach. I'm not strong. I can't do that." I'm like, "Have you ever tried?" She's like, "Well, no." I'm like, "Well, come on." So I got her to get into a chair, and we did some basic throws, and she's like, "All right, this is kind of cool." And she loved it. She had so much fun. We also got her into what's called a race chair. And in track and field, if you're not able-bodied to stand and run, you get in a race chair. So you're actually kind of balled up and leaning forward, and you are still pushing with your hands on the wheels. But it's a little different version than you think, like a wheelchair, because it has this long nose on it, like a wheel in the front and two in the back. And so she got into a race chair, and she was fast. And she was good. She's like, "All right, maybe I am a track and field athlete after all." And, fast forward, Warrior Games, Invictus Games, she's now training for the Paralympics in the javelin. So the javelin's not offered in Warrior Games, but she picked up the javelin, and it was the most natural movement I've ever seen. And javelin is not a natural movement because it is tough. She just picked up and she goes, fling, and it just goes. She's like, "Is that it?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's it." Just do that. I'm in awe of her, because she just got it. And so she's come up to train with me a number of times, because she lived in New Mexico for a while, and she's in Missouri. So she is actively training for the Paralympics because of adaptive sport. And I'm just so proud of her. And she continuously says, "I'm just so excited you bullied me into throwing," because that's how she got into it. And it's just I'm just so proud of her, and I'm just excited to see what she does.
Yeah, that's awesome. Peer pressure is great sometimes.
Oh yeah. I'm a throwing bully. I love people to try throwing because it's just so much fun.
If we ever meet in person, I would love to try it. I never did. So when are the next games? When are the next Paralympics?
The next games actually Paris. So the Paris Paralympics will be they'll have the able-bodied like in August, end of July, August, and then Paralympics will start the last 2 weeks of August into September. So fingers crossed. I hope I'm on a short list to potentially coach. I've coached the Para Pan Am Games in Peru, and then also in Chile just recently last year. And just it's a tremendous group of athletes, and they're not all military. At the Paralympic level, you'll probably have other athletes that either had degenerative disease or like a congenital disease, or other accidents. Maybe they have a prosthetic of some sort. But it's just a ton of fun to work with these athletes that just impress me every day, and they are so serious about their training, and they want to just serve the United States in a different way.
Yeah, 100%. No, that's awesome. So hopefully you'll make the Olympics after all, maybe as a coach.
I'd be happy to do it as a coach for sure.
So what do you do now? I mean, is that your
Well, now I gallivant the world and just goof off all the time and somehow get paid to do it with the Highland Games. But my full-time job is actually a personal trainer. So I work at a gym called Athletes Arena, and we're a private facility that we do have CrossFit. We have personal training. We have some group classes and speed and agility stuff for kids. So we have all ages that train there. I mostly do the personal training, and I tend to get the clients that have unusual circumstances. Either they're kind of in between, they just got rehab from an injury or a surgery, and they aren't quite ready to go back to full force, so like the ready to play kind of athlete. Or I have, today I had Jared has Down syndrome, so I work with people with other disabilities. Another kid, Grant, was in a car accident when he was 15. I trained he and his parents, 3 or 5 days a week. And then, it's Athletes Arena, but I actually don't train any like athletes. I train just regular people who just want to be healthy and want to be strong. And that's my favorite. I love helping people get strong.
That's great. So what do you do to stay in shape now? So this podcast I always say is for the silver savages, right? So people in our age.
I am a silver savage for sure. I put my body through a test of I blew up my ACL in 2013. I had my hip repair in 2018. I'm still experiencing some hip arthritis, and I due to a mountain biking fall, I dislocated my left elbow. And yeah, I think I have, L4, L5 issues that we all have. So my life, my training is at least 20 minutes of mobility a day. So I have a very awesome personal trainer, actually. My physical therapist, his name is Dr. Brandon Vaughn. He is super awesome. He always thinks outside the box, understands that I'm a pretty competitive person and I don't like to sit on the sidelines for very long. So he's always coming up with great ways for me to stay mobile and stay healthy because I'm 44. I just had my birthday. So I'm 44 now, and I still want to train like I'm 24, but I know I can't. So like today, I did about 20 minutes of mobility before I started my upper body workout. And it's not always just upper body mobility. I do all my lower body too, because if I don't move, I lock up and I feel terrible. So that is what my training looks like now. It's usually 20 minutes of mobility, and then maybe I got 40 minutes of actual strength training. But I love to train. I love moving weights. I don't like cardio, so I try to avoid that.
That's why we don't play basketball.
No, yeah, no, yeah, right.
Right.
And I try to take a walk with the dog every day. We usually go 40 minutes to an hour. That's actually my favorite time, because I can just have that little bit of time in the middle of the day where I can just wind down a minute and recharge for the afternoon. Because I do feel that what I do as my job is it's mentally and physically demanding. Working with people, sometimes I do have to assist some of my clients, physically if they do have disabilities, or I'm moving weights around all day long, helping people unrack things and load plates. So I'm physically demanded of myself all day. So I'm active just with my job. And also I have zero excuses, because I have a set of bands anywhere I want. I have a floor. I have a foam roller right next to me. So I do make the effort that if I have any downtime, that I'll try and do something, even if it's 3 minutes of something. If it's a foam roller, if I decide to stretch my piriformis, something like that. So I'm very fortunate that I have a nice library of quick and easy mobility things to do. Otherwise, if I had a desk job, I would hate it, and I would be a wreck physically.
I can relate to that one for sure.
Yeah.
So if people want to support any of your endeavors right now, from working with the Warriors to anything else that you're doing, how can they get in touch with you, and what kind of support would you like to see from them?
Well, feel free to check me out on athletesarena.com. I believe my email is on there. It's my first name, Adriane. It's spelled differently, Adriane, at athletesarena.com. Feel free to send me an email, or you can do an inquiry through our website to get in touch with me. But I'm also on Instagram. My handle is AdriSue, AdriSue. And I have a, I just post stuff about the Highland Games. I'll post occasionally training stuff, but I love to post about my athletes when we do the Highland Game, or sorry, the Warrior Games or Invictus, because I mean they're the true stars in what they do and what they've accomplished, with their injuries and overcoming that. Because I really truly feel that anybody can find their activity, whatever it might be. Maybe it's walking, maybe it's water aerobics, maybe it's something that they never thought they would try. And I found some athletes that have gone through their SRUs and the soldiers who are really dealing with something that they find out they love archery. You have all these sports that are available, but they just didn't know about it. So I would love to help people get in the right direction.
Awesome. I like finishing this podcast by asking our guests if there's anything that they would love to leave our listeners with, and I feel like you just did.
Oh,
no, so that's awesome. I appreciate your time. This was an awesome story, and I hope our listeners take something out of it and certainly get engaged and involved with athleticism. Sorry, I can't speak in general, but certainly working with some of more the disabled and the limited capable athletes. I found it super rewarding when I got the opportunity to do so, and I agree with you. It's a different. I feel like it's a different heart. It's a different level of motivation. It's a different drive, and just the joy that you see them getting out of it. I mean, professional athlete that does it for the money is just not the same.
Yeah.
So
and I've been around professional athletes. When I was training, with Charles, we had guys from the Arizona Cardinals come in, and they were just doing their stuff, whatever. And I was training alongside them, and it was no different than whatever, like I was in high school and college. But when I was training with athletes, from Army and from, the Invictus team, like there was just this different energy. Like they knew the purpose. They weren't there for a job. There was a purpose aside from a paycheck, and it was very inspiring. And it just fires you up, and I want to thank you. I do want people to reach out, because there's a ton of adapted sport and veteran communities and organizations that always need volunteers, that just to show up and help. If it's one day a month or something, that you can provide some extra help and some time, and you never know, you might just be that inspiration for someone else to try a new sport or to feel comfortable. Well, I wanted to do a ride, but I don't have anybody to ride with. So, all right, well, I'll go ride with you, and all of a sudden they have a new sport, So I want to encourage everybody to just be active.
No, love it. Well, Adriane, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening. And I can't wait.
Thanks for the invite.
Well, have a wonderful rest of your day, and I hope to see you in Paris. Well, I won't see you personally on the TV, so hopefully you'll be in Paris.
That would be very cool. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adriane.
Yeah.